It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160. Our conversation with Tom Callahan is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. He's been a columnist for Time Magazine and a number of different newspapers. His book is called Gods at Play, an eyewitness account of great moments in American sports. Let's say good morning to Tom Callahan. Tom, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us. I got to tell you how much I love this book of yours. It's amazing. It doesn't seem like anything has happened in the American sporting landscape since about 1950 that you haven't been there.
Well, I was lucky. I was standing there accidentally at a lot of secretariats' finish lines and big fight in Africa. I was the last guy to talk to Roberto Clemente. I had him alone. I had him to myself after they lost the playoffs to the Reds on a wild pitch of all things, and I avoided the Reds locker room because I didn't want to get doused with champagne, and I ended up with Roberto.
And it's amazing the article that you write about Roberto and the connections that you make. The Reds players, the Buccos players, the heartbreak that must have just crushed Manny Sanguillen and the Pirate teammates. The way that you write this, that's a really good place to start our conversation today because it is so well written, and it's really a celebration of your writing that I was drawn to as much as anything. But that story really brought it home. Well,
thank you very much. Clemente was the best player I ever saw. I believe Willie Mays was better, only because everybody I respect says so. But I only saw the second half of Mays. And I saw Clemente at the top of his game. The running catch, the Clemente whirl, the fling, the swing, and I liked him too. I can't really say I knew him, but I liked him. And when I got the word that he had died, I can't even explain this, but I couldn't breathe for a full minute. It was like something slugged me in the stomach. Oh. And he was. He obviously he was special, and Pittsburgh people know this the most. But yeah, he was special.
He was, and that's just one of the stories that you get into. I love the conversations that you have away from the playing arena, away from what's actually happening on the playing field in front of you. The Kareem Abdul-Jabbar conversation is especially appealing. You really. I know that you say you don't really know these guys, but you get to spend some quiet moments with them and find a different aspect of their character that we might not ever consider.
You're right. One of the times I was with Kareem, who wasn't the surly guy people thought he was. He was a very and is a very intelligent man. And I never had a conversation with him that didn't stay with me. And one time I was in Houston in his hotel room, just the two of us were talking near the end of his career. And I mentioned to him that Lucius Allen, an old UCLA and Milwaukee teammate, had told me that, he said, Lewis, he still called him Lewis. Uh-huh. He said Lewis was intimidated by his own height. And Kareem said to me, ashamed is a better word. He said, I was ashamed at how high my head was above my high school class. Mm. And he said, I searched and searched for role models, and I couldn't, for a long this time, I couldn't find any. I said, but you finally did. And he said, yes. And I said, who were they? And he said, I'm not sure I want to say. I said, Wilt Chamberlain? He said, are you crazy? He said, and then we both laughed, but he stopped first. And in a soft voice, I'll never forget this, he said, the Empire State Building, the redwood trees. Well, you can't make up a better answer than that.
No. It's amazing how you're able to draw that out of them as well. I want to talk about the Cool Papa Bell article.
Yeah.
There's. I don't think I've read anything as beautifully written as that in the longest of times. Cool Papa Bell was a very, very humble man, and it's just a lovely story of him and his wife, isn't it?
Yeah, he was. I was lucky. I went to his home in East St. Louis, and he asked me. We were talking, and he said, do you know Stan Musial? And I said, not really, but I've talked to him. And he told me, he said I've stamped my foot and clapped my hands while he played the harmonica on the streets here.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and then he said, how about with Ted Williams? Do you know Ted Williams? I said, same thing. I've talked to him. I got along with him. For some reason, Williams, of course, who hated sports writers, for some reason I got along with him. And I think the reason was I never tried to interview him. You know, he interviewed you. He'd say to me, I hear you're from Baltimore, right? And I'd say, yeah, born in Chicago, but I went to school in Baltimore. He says, you must have played lacrosse instead of baseball. And I said, after Little League Baseball, yeah, everybody played lacrosse. Let me ask you something, Tommy. Do you know Unitas? And I'd say a little. And he'd say, what happens if Unitas is standing at the line and all of a sudden the stadium bursts into flames? I said, he runs the play. That's God-given. That's God. Good to see you, Tommy. Next year we'll talk about Chicago. So now I'm with Cool Papa Bell, and I said, and he told me, he said, I've never met Ted Williams, but I love him. And I said, why? And he said, because he's not I've heard he's not one of the world's great liberals. And I said, I've heard that too. And he said, but when he went into the Hall of Fame, he told baseball he wanted to mention the Negro Leagues, and baseball told him not to. And he told baseball to sit on a tack. And I went back and looked at his speech. It was a very short speech, but in there he said, I wish that there'd be room for, you know, the great Negro League players who never had a chance to play, who were good enough and never had a chance. And Bell said, wasn't that great, you know?
Yeah.
But Bell, he told me that he once went to the visitors' locker room door and waited for Maury Wills. And he said to Wills when he found him, he told him who he was, and he says, you may have heard of me. If not, it don't matter. He says, but I want to tell you something that might get you a little extra time on the base paths. He said, when you're getting ready to make sure your batters get as far back in the box as they can. That'll nudge the catcher back a half, get you another half step. Mm-hmm. And Wills watched him walk away and said, I never would have thought of it. Well, that was the year Wills broke the base stealing record.
Oh man, it's a great story, and Cool Papa Bell and his wife. It's such a beautifully told story. You, through the course of the book, of course, you detail some complicated relationships like that with Johnny Bench, some just outstandingly funny relationships like that with Pete Rose, which I watch that mind at work, and it boggles my mind even today. But you also celebrate other writers through this book. You've worked with a lot of guys, really good guys. Yeah,
when I first showed up, back when sports writers wore fedoras and ties and coats, now they dress like sharecroppers. and he and the big guy of the day was Red Smith in New York. And by pure accident, like most things in my lucky life, I became Red's last best friend. We traveled together. Sports writers traveled like racehorses in those days, 101A. And so I went to a lot of events with Red, stayed at his home in New Canaan, Connecticut, for any New York event. And so it was, it was great. It was great, a great break for me. And there were a lot of good writers I was around. Jim Murray in L.A. and like you name them out to town, and I'd tell you the guy. But anyway, near the end, I was Red's legs, because he was up there. He was up there in his 70s, and he'd start his column in the press box, and I'd go down and get a quote or two, and I'd come up, and most of the time he'd be into his story. He didn't want to be interrupted. He'd go, I'm rich, and I'd say, okay. But one time I had to stop him. I said, Red, I got to stop you. We were in Yankee Stadium. Reggie Jackson had hit 3 home runs off 3 first deliveries from 3 different Dodger pitchers to win the World Series. And I had stopped off at Steve Garvey's locker in the Dodger clubhouse, and Garvey told me the third time Reggie rounded first, when I was sure nobody was looking, I applauded into my glove. And, of course, that was Red's punchline the next day and mine, too.
Oh, yeah. That's gorgeous. What a gorgeous story that is. What you write about Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, too, even George Foreman, it is an entire masterful chapter. The Secretariat was one of my three favorite athletes of all time. Even wrestling with Sonny Liston, how you manage to get yourself in some of these situations, it makes the book just so much fun, and it really acquaints us again with what writing is really about. Tom Callahan. The book is called Gods at Play, an eyewitness account of great moments in American sports, and it is absolutely fantastic. Tom, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you so much for reading my book, and I really, really have enjoyed talking with you.
I appreciate it. Have a great day today.
You too. You too.